Welcome to Just in Stride podcast, Lawrence. How are you?
I'm great, thanks, Justin. Really stoked to be here.
Yeah, I think it's a long time coming for me. We've known each other quite some time through the run scene in Montreal, and always a pleasure to chat and get a run in.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's I struggled to put I don't know. I feel 5 years, 6 years sounds about right, but maybe it's more.
Right? Yeah, time flies. I'm sure these last 2 weeks have flown by for you. You've had so much going on. I've been following along on your feed and your company's feed. Exact. It's well presented on your shirt. You want to tell us about a little bit about what's been going on and
But
how you've
the
been
last 2 weeks
coping?
have been really, really demanding. Just not so long ago, we started our company's sales operations in the US. A massive step for any Canadian company, and so that saw us go down to Boston Marathon weekend to basically connect with the run community, the Boston Marathon. I'm not going to use the word community. I'm just going to use the word like massive crowd, the Boston Marathon massive crowd, and some awesome partner brands that we're working with. So that was our first um, sort of non-trade show, actually in the thick of an event, a thick of a race weekend, with all the underground run scene stuff going on too. So really exciting to do that in a new country. Huge learning, very energizing, and also some and also it's for me it was going back home in a way. So actually I spent 3 years growing up in Boston. I went to high school there, and then fast forward to this weekend, um, big party at the Cieli new space, Cieli Athletics, here in Montreal, our hometown. That was Friday. I don't do much partying as a 50-year-old like dad of two and running a business with my wife. Like partying something. I know there was a party since our wedding, but it doesn't. There weren't many. So Friday was a big party. That was a lot of fun. And Saturday was actually a down day for us. But Sunday, I was so happy to put together a very scrambled last minute team for Run Around 125, which is part of Montreal's Runk series of unsanctioned races. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, yesterday was the most fun I've had at a sort of sporting event in some years. Like it was absolutely brilliant. And and it was got nothing to do with where we finished because we rocked in at 18th place of 20 teams. I only found that out like a day afterwards. So much that we're just caught up in the mood and the vibe. But yeah, so Boston racing here, running the business, and then the personal life too. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
been a busy couple of weeks.
And that's saying a lot for that runk race, coming
Oh
from
yeah,
Boston, which is like the mecca for running. But for anybody who doesn't know that race, I was part of the original team that tried to do the run around the
I
island of
figure. Yeah, that
Montreal
makes sense.
for 125 kilometers, and that was fun in itself. But when you add in it's a relay around the island of Montreal. And when you add in all those teams, it creates, some competitiveness, it creates some fun, some community vibes, and everyone's there for different reasons. But it's cool to hear you had a good experience with that and had a lot of fun in the process.
Yeah,
Um,
and kind of what it reminded me of in the early days when we started the company, we didn't have the same, it wasn't as demanding, when you have eight customers, guess what? You do have time to turn up to a race and actually participate. But in the early days when me and Marianne would go to mainly trail races in Quebec and things like that, we had this sort of unwritten rule that like whenever we go to an event to work, at least one family member, so the four of us, me and Marianne and our two kids, because they were young, they come along, right? At least one family member, ideally, all of us would participate in one of the distances of the race, even if it was just like, the 2K or whatever, just to sort of have that bit of fun along in your workday. But with the years as the company's grown, it got harder and harder to sort of to keep on doing that. And of course, like, your average, 14, 15-year-old kid is maybe like, it's not so cool to race with your dad. Um,
yeah,
but yesterday was a kind of like a reminder of like, oh yeah, this is the energy and vibe which inspired us to like start the company. Those early years of, maybe it wasn't so successful as a business, but it was really, we're following our passion. And so yesterday was like a real, like, it wasn't a flashback. It was like picking Lawrence up and dumping him in the bath. It was like a waterboarding of joy and excitement of being able to actually fully take part without worrying about, okay, is there enough product on that feed station? Like, oh, what do we have to put out on Instagram? And like at 2 p.m., like none of that, just in the team, in the car, in the pouring rain with 5 other getting smellier and smellier runners. In fact, they weren't very smelly. I think I was the only one that was smelly. But yeah, good times.
So
Amazing
so
energy.
time for you to unwind and relax a little bit,
100%. Oh yeah, that's exactly what it was. I let 100% loose. I had my 2 JBL speakers, waterproof. Shout out to JBL. Those waterproof speakers, man. When you're waiting for that relay runner to come and it's peeing down with rain, those made the difference.
So who made up your team?
So we had my old friends Alex Provo and Karine Corbet, who are very, very serious athletes. And we did have a team set up, but some last minute work obligations and this and that meant that I was actually in Boston. I think it was Monday or Sunday. It was a busy day. I think it was the Sunday, and I realized, due to a sort of a lack of planning as a fun event and not a work event, I hadn't given it all my sort of planning energy. A couple of unfortunate situations, like an injury of one person, some work commitments with a couple from Toronto. I found myself that our team of 6 consisted of me and 2 photographers, and that wasn't a good situation. So I had to kind of scramble the network, which meant that on Sunday morning at 5:30, I met for the first time in my life 3 of the team members: Julian, Mila, and Michelle, and Alex and Karine, who I've known for a while, and they managed to commit maybe 48 hours before the race. And so that was our team. So Michelle Bousquet, Mila, and Julien, who I just met through with the help of one of our ambassadors, just friends of friends of friends. And the way I looked at it was how the team can only be awesome if the people who like, oh sure, yeah, I'll jump in for 125 key relay. Everyone knew the weather at this point, in the peeing down rain with a bunch of people that I don't know. If those people are putting their hand up to join a team, there's no way it can go wrong. And the positivity and the vibe was just brilliant. We gelled. I think within about 8 minutes, I think the team gelled, and we just had a blast the whole day long.
So did you guys really break down the strategy big time? Or because, Alex and Corinne, they're
Yeah,
these adventure races, stage racing, they're probably the more serious of the athletes, I'd say. And
100%. We did so, but we did have a bit of an ace in the hole. So Alistair, my business partner, was our crew, and Alistair has done run around a couple of times. He's a very experienced runner, particularly short and long distance. I mean, he does it all. He does road, he does track, he does trail, he does ultra trail, and we had the benefit of his experience. However, Alistair's not like a big detailed guy. He's not a sort of a formal planner, and that's one of the really fun things of playing and working with Alistair. But we knew that, okay, we're going to do 3K legs and cycle through. So we did have like a plan, and as we met those people, as we met together at like 5:40 in the morning on Sunday for the first time, it was kind of like, so like, where do we go? Who's running? What's the course? And it's really, we hadn't communicated any of those things, but it's not very complicated. It's like, okay, me, then you, then you, then you, then you, and we keep on going till one of us gets lost or we get at the finish. So that was the strategy. I think that can be called a strategy, and it worked absolutely great. We just had one hiccup where we did get to the rendezvous, the 3K rendezvous, late, and we missed our runner. Mila just kept on going. She did maybe 8K instead of 3. She was asking herself some questions.
oh
Have they
my
gone the wrong
God.
way? Should I go down this straight? Should I go down this straight? Is in that one-way section on Gouin, where it's more difficult to crew you can't like patrol for your runner. We didn't have any
Yeah.
tracking devices, but we found her. She was awesome.
Yeah.
we picked up, and it was all good.
Now, it's grown quite a bit, that event. It's funny to
Oh,
see it
huge.
evolve over time, and now it's 18 teams. Did you find it
20
hectic?
teams.
20
20 teams.
teams. My bad there. But did you find it hectic? Did you find it worked out super smoothly? How
Oh,
was the
to be
traffic?
no, to be no, to be honest, I think well, the early start in downtown Montreal, there's not a lot of people in on Notre Dame at 5:45 in the morning on a Sunday. Um, the rain helped even more, so it wasn't hectic at all. We could take over that bit of the street for a brief moment, totally safe. There was lots of volunteers, making sure that the start was safe. And 20 people isn't, as it's a relay, 20 teams, 120 people, but only 20 people running at any single time.
Mhm.
It's and it thinned out pretty quick. I set off at 3:35 to my great horror with everyone else, but sure enough, about 50 seconds later, I got to a more reasonable pace for someone of my abilities, and so quite quickly there's after before the first handover, that it's beginning to thin out, and so you can easily run on a sidewalk. And what's really fun to see is the different strategies, right? So we had our we wanted to keep it simple and not be thinking about changeovers. So it's just like every 3K, you run 3K and you hand over to your buddy. Other teams were tended probably doing maybe even shorter legs, the more competitive teams. And some people doing it in sections. So somebody on the bike, literally running 1K, being accompanied and switching over every K, going from bike run, and then switching out to another couple a few K down the road when they're hitting their crew car.
Okay, nice. That's great. Well, I love that event. I think it's
So a lot
super
of
fun.
variety. Like
Yeah,
you don't really know what's going on, to be honest. You can't
yeah.
you can't figure it out.
It's like organized chaos. It's amazing,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
you're not alone. I mean, you got some crazy guys running it solo, which is always fun, but
Yeah, I think there was 4 this year. Yeah.
wow, yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. And it's only going to get better and better, I think, as it goes on here. So, yeah, you
And
mentioned living in Boston.
mm,
I think you show up to an event like this, and a lot of people know you. They know you as someone that's founded Xact. They know you as a community run guy. But before that, before all that, can you give us a little history of who Lawrence is?
Sure. So I think a lot of movement, not necessarily athletic movement, but no, I mean, I grew up in multiple countries, both as a kid, then as a student, and then as a starting my career. So born in England, southwest England, grew up in Bristol. Um, Moved to Italy. I started school, like preschool, actually in Italy, where my parents moved. My parents split up. My dad stayed in Italy. I moved back to England with my mum, and that's where I continued to grow up until we moved to the US, and that's where I finished like high school. So I went to Brookline High in a suburb in West Boston, and actually a chunk of where the Boston Marathon runs through. After the US, so then when I turned 18, so I was had an adult label apparently, and that's when we moved back to Europe. I moved back to the UK. Um, couple of reasons. The tuition fees in 1990 in the UK, so university tuition was free back then, no longer is. Whereas university tuition in the US definitely not free. So and I was eligible for that as a British citizen. And also, I got to admit, as a passionate cook, even back then, I was a passionate cook, and it kind of infuriated me that even like in my own home, if I needed like a little bit of dry white wine to finish a deglaçage of a sauce, you got to be 21 to buy some wine, man. So
Hmm.
I couldn't even cook how I wanted to, let alone celebrate a little as a lot of 18-year-olds like to do. So I moved back to the UK, went to university there. Did an exchange, which took me to France, where I met Marianne, who then later became my wife and mum of our kids, and now business partner and president of Xact Nutrition. That's something I'm not sure if enough people know about, but I'm super proud to be part of an organization with female leadership, with a woman running at the head of the company.
Hmm.
I tend to be a bit more the public face of it, and so does Alistair. So I don't think people necessarily know that's the case. But our president is Marianne Regnault, and she really does run the company. So in France, kids were born, um, and it was in 2006 that we all moved to Canada, and that's when we finally stopped moving around. So I'm sat here in my house in Mile End in downtown Montreal,
Right.
and I think me and Marianne, there's a figure we threw out. I think in the 10 years before we moved to Canada, I think we moved 12 or 14 times. So on average, every 8 months for studies, for work, for all sorts of positive reasons coming from ourselves. But it's a lot of charging around. And in 2006, we moved to our house in Mile End on Clark Street, in the heart of bagel and coffee country. And we haven't moved since. So it's kind of like our kids have this perspective who have grown up in Quebec, and my son was 8 months when we moved here. My daughter 2 years old. They're like, no, we never move. I'm like, no, we move all the time. It's like, oh no, you're right. We haven't moved in the last 20 years.
Right. Well, what does that
And
do for like? I'm always curious. Like, I've recently moved. I
mm,
grew up and lived in
that's right. You
Montreal
moved
my
to
whole
Europe. Yeah.
whole life. Moved to Europe, but I always wonder what that does to you on the development side
Mm.
as a kid growing up, having to change homes all the time. Like, did you find that difficult? Looking back, do you think that's? I mean, for sure, it's shaped who you are today.
Do you know what in the moment, and even looking back on it, I never was aware of any sort of experienced it as difficulty. I found it energizing and exciting. I think all the time up until the pandemic, and that was for the first time where I felt, do you know what? It would be kind of nice just to be able to go and see uh, my dad, my mum, our family. Marianne's dad. But with the borders closed and them us all like living in different countries, for the first time I experienced the negative side of being far and being distant from your family and friends too, because of course we left friends behind when we moved to North America. But as a kid growing up, no, we found it. I found it always super stimulating. I think it. I think I'm incredibly fortunate to have been able to live so many opportunities to experience like new perspectives. The biggest one had to be moving from my private all boys school in Bristol at 14, going to a public 2,000 student body high school in Boston. Like it could not, like the contrast could not be much more, apart from maybe if I'd gone to Asia or something like that. I mean, I still was speaking English, but that seemed to be the only commonality. I need to do something about the hound.
Yeah,
Are we
no
able to
problem.
pause and stuff like
Yeah,
that? I need to
I will
give her
do
another
that.
bone.
Yeah. And so like, that takes care of like the travel side, but like you mentioned also that you like to cook, and I was going to ask you about like,
I've
you're in the
always loved,
nutrition game now, so like,
yeah.
but maybe that kind of makes sense. So why the cooking passion?
I think I just love eating. I think it's as simple as that.
Don't we all?
Um, yeah. But I really do like quite a lot. It is. I think I like cooking more than eating, but the cooking definitely came from wanting to eat nice stuff. And I think it all started with I was like super lucky. My entire like everyone in my family, grandparents, mum, my stepmom, lots and lots of really like great cooks, and spending time eating together was always a really enjoyable and big part of family life. Um, but my mum and stepmom, so whether I was with my dad or with my mum, great cooks, but not big dessert cooks. So I started cooking desserts to fill that dessert hole, and really basic things. But like when I was 8, like rice pudding, which is not the best dessert, but hey, I
Hmm.
made it. And then it evolved from there, and then it got a bit more, I'd say, serious with my love of curry, with Indian cuisine, and I went full tilt into like I wouldn't just like buy the curry mix. I'd buy the individual spices, roast them if necessary, grind them, and that just brings a different level of awesome curry. And probably fair to say, when I when I moved out of home and had like responsibility for my own time and budget and studies, probably spent it too much. Probably like didn't get the balance just right into like the studying bit and like the cooking bit. I invested heavily in cooking, and so imagine yourself, you're living in a flat in Birmingham with a bunch of like people between 18 and 20, and of course they've all just moved out from home like a month ago. Like their mum was cooking for them or their dad was cooking for them. They
Yeah.
weren't cooking for themselves. They maybe went to the
Yeah.
fish and chip shop, and I was just like, I don't know. I do like welcoming and entertaining and experiencing those moments of camaraderie, and I could cook. I went fully into cooking, like for my like newfound like student friends and colleagues and peers. But
Hmm.
I'd do like 3-course meals and stuff like that, and have like 8 people around for dinner, and like people would be eating this just like, oh my god, this is brilliant. And of course, when you get that positive feedback happening, you adapt. So I
Yeah.
adapted. I spent more and more time, and I never really stopped. And in a funny way, that's kind of what led us to even starting the company. It's from a desire to make something that you eat, and I think I can do that. I think I might be able to do it actually a little bit better. So it's not me cooking the gels, by the way, but the spark was there.
And I'm sure like living in places like Italy, France, where there's this,
Not too shabby. Yeah,
it's got a good influence on you.
they know
And I gotta
something about
say,
making
there's
food.
and yeah, and there's honestly now like, I'm cooking more and more myself and trying new things, and there's nothing more satisfying, I'd say, than like making a really good meal for yourself.
I reckon there's
And
two things. There's two activities in human existence where the amount of effort you put in, so the what you get out of it is directly proportional to the effort you put in, and there's sport and cooking. Everything else, there's these other factors that you don't necessarily control.
yeah.
But I think sport and making meals, you're pretty much guaranteed a result that's proportional to and not time necessarily, but energy and passion put in.
Yeah, totally. And it's always nice to say like, well, you second guess going to a restaurant maybe too, because you're like, well, I can make that at home. Like, why would I go
Yeah.
there when I can make it just as good as home,
Mm,
if not better? And they're charging insane prices for that kind of stuff. So yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it's a satisfying proposition for sure. And even if you have to buy all the ingredients and stuff, you play some music. There's a whole like atmosphere that goes into it. Not everyone's into that, but I quite enjoy it. So, and now the
Definitely.
sports side for you,
Yeah.
sport and the cooking. So now, where's the sports side?
So
Where's your
the
intro to
sport
sports?
the sport really came from. So I have like I think it's fair to say zero sort of family background with sport. My it is they weren't anti, but certainly not like like not leading by example at all. Like never ever. I have no memory of my family like doing anything sporty. Um, Cooking, yes. Sports, no. So that all came from like I think enforced sport at school, and in my school that was rugby, cricket, and like the annual cross country race. So it was it really was. Um, I wouldn't say it was against my will, but I just kind of like followed. I mean, I just did what I was told. I just like, oh, Colsell, prop, which is a very unglamorous position in rugby. Still got both ears though, so I'm quite
Yeah, well,
quite
that's
happy
good.
about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So yeah, rugby was my sort of love hate sport. Started with, I guess, indifference, moved to hate, but then actually, by the time I was maybe turning like 17, 18 and at university, actually really grew to really enjoy it and love it. I was never a great rugby player, but once again, I think what really changed rugby for me was when I moved to France. So language barrier. So I didn't speak. I mean, I had schoolboy written French when I moved to Lyon at university. So the language barrier, even the classes were super challenging. And I wasn't like I spent too much time cooking, so I wasn't like super like wasn't like I was on point when I arrived.
Yeah.
But I did have rugby, and so I joined the university side. And what was absolutely fantastic, there is an international brother and sisterhood of rugby. Like if you turn up with a pair of rugby boots, like I was told this by my coach at high school, if you can find a game anywhere in the world pretty much, and you'll be welcomed. And that was certainly the case for me as I experienced it in Lyon in France. So I joined the club, and what was great was because what happens often when particularly Brits are good at this, but I think it's the same for any country. If you move to a foreign country and there is a language barrier, you'll very quickly find all the other Brits or Germans or Scandies that all speak English. But the
Yeah.
fact that I was able to integrate the rugby club, I was the only Brit in the rugby club, and I learned French so quickly that really helped me so much more. And you found a community straight away. Like you're part of a team, and you'd go and suffer on the field together, get beaten, and then commiserate, stroke celebrate afterwards. So that was a really positive thing, and it's kind of fun to see like it being like basically a pain in the ass, something you had to do on a Saturday morning, like in November in Bristol, which is actually okay, but getting to it's not so much fun. But it changed into something I really relished and look forward to, and still have friendships that date from that rugby club today
Right.
in Lyon.
And isn't there some parallels between what you experience in rugby and the running scene now?
100%. Just as answering the question, that I actually realized, and that's kind of how running happened maybe 10 years afterwards. So running started for me when I was actually living and working in France, in Paris, the Parisian region at any rate. And a bunch of university friends, we decided together to do the Great North Run as a not as a team, not run it together, but we'd all train for it separately, meet in Newcastle, do the same race, and raise money for a local hospital up there. And so it's a half marathon, the Great North Run. It's huge. It's one of the biggest in the world at the time. I think it's only Lisbon which has a bigger one. I can't remember how many runners there are, but it's tens of thousands of runners. It's like 30,000, something like that. And that was the first like time I was like, okay, I'll. In fact, you know what? I committed to buy the bib and train with all my mates. For whatever reason, I got a little bit behind, and I never bought the bib. And all my mates did, but I went and ran it anyway. And we're sort of there the night before, staying in a caravan park outside Newcastle. That's not glamorous, by the way, just in case. And I was like, yeah, fucking, I don't have the bib, but I trained and everything, and like I trained actually quite like very seriously for me at the time, at any rate. And I was really stoked and ready to do the race, but I'd kind of I'll just run it anyway. I won't do the bib. And so my mate Ben was like, well, I think if you just put 4 safety pins in your t-shirt, like no one will ask anything. And so what's actually a bit of a shame is I actually did a fairly decent time, but because it was not recorded, and I don't think I had a GPS watch. No, I definitely didn't have a GPS watch at the time. There's no sort of record of it. But that was my first like introduction to like training for event, running it with friends, celebrating it afterwards. And of course the race itself is just a tiny part of it. But I think it's a really, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have experienced all the other things like the training together, because we did manage to train together a little bit. And the fun and the sense of accomplishment that you get after it. But yeah, not official. Didn't have a bid. No time.
Never happened. There's no social media, so we can't tell if it actually happened or not. So would you say that for you, sport is less about the actual act of the sport and more about the whole environment that you're in, like the overall, the bigger picture between, from what you're
so now I see that, but I didn't see that earlier on. It was that definitely something that changed. So I was that guy who I would sign up. So after that positive experience, after that, I was like, I want to do another one. And it wasn't like some relentless thing. It was occasional. I'd do it like a couple a year, but there was some real highlights. We would pick the event because we've always did it as a group of friends. We'd pick the event for. We're definitely picking it for, I guess, the experience or the setting of where the event was. So it wouldn't be like, okay, well, when's the next 10K I don't want to travel too far or anything. It was like, no, let's go to that place and do that race. So one of them was Marseille Cassis. absolutely spectacular. I think it's a half marathon. It might be just a weird distance, like 18K or something. But the reason we picked that was for the beauty of, you leave Marseille and there's a big ass climb as you're climbing up the coastal cliffs. Stunning views, and then credit to me, I had the foresight. You can imagine there's, I don't know, 20,000 people arriving in Cassis, which is a village. Like it's not a town. It's a village.
Yeah.
Gorgeous. But I somehow managed to get a table at this like incredible restaurant, and that once again was um, all the people that had ran the race, but also a couple of people that come on who weren't running. They just wanted the weekend away, and their partners as well. Having that lunch post race after a little dip in the Mediterranean, having run the 20-ish K, phenomenal feeling. And then I think, now that I think about it, I hadn't even thought about the time, but what was really cool about that is that there were friends from England that came over to run that, but also friends from France as well. And on a sort of micro level, you're kind of seeing what happens in our run community today here in like in Montreal or Toronto or Boston. Just like there's something really, when people are coming together for that racing running experience, somehow it's just a million times easy to forge relationships and make bonds that seem to be maybe a bit more meaningful than other situations you might make those connections, like at work or
Yeah.
at school or so on. I definitely see that sort of common thread, and I definitely agree that it's everything surrounding the actual timed running bit rather than the timed running bit itself.
And would you say you've always had like a positive relationship to sport?
Oh, definitely. Because remember what we were talking about a bit earlier, like love to cook, love to eat, like like to celebrate a little bit, maybe a little bit too much. And so a big part of any sport that I was doing, whether it be running, skiing, maybe a bit less, but biking or hiking. I'm a huge. I love hiking and basically experiencing the outdoors, particularly the mountains. It was definitely a conscious effort of like, well, if we're gonna do some celebrating, we should probably like maybe stay out a bit longer or walk a bit further or climb a bit higher or run a bit longer or maybe run a bit faster. So I saw that definitely as a positive thing, for our health, and also maybe more important than that, I think the health was kind of uh, like a comforting offshoot rather than something driving it.
Hmm.
What was driving it very much always was having that essentially, I think, that sense of achievement and accomplishment, not just through like necessarily through doing something physically hard, but maybe just like having a wonderful view. I'm a huge fan of a good view, which is why I always prefer vacationing in the mountains than at the seaside.
Hmm. Yeah,
Those are
and I'm starting to get that fever too, being in
well, where you
Switzerland,
live,
like
absolutely. Well,
like
you've got so many opportunities. Yeah,
yeah, where's this trail race, and I'm not a trail guy, but I'm like, I'm kind of down
yeah,
to like
100%.
to
So
crest
gorgeous.
that mountain peak, and
Yeah,
there's all kinds of beautiful things around us, and even close to our home, in Montreal, it's beautiful too. I remember I went out with some friends. It was like a photo shoot hiking in Bromo or maybe Mont Orford or something like that. And we crossed paths with you actually with your
that's right.
family,
That's right.
doing
I remember
a
that. Yeah, you
hike,
with
and
Marty and Cedric. Yeah.
yeah, you gave us some bars, and
Yes.
there's never a lack of fuel. But it's nice that you can also now integrate that into your own family too, and show them that that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's funny. So definitely it was me and my wife and I, we followed like our career, which was wonderful and everything. But at a certain point, it was it didn't feel as enriching as it did earlier, and it was very much so. One thing that was a very conscious and deliberate decision was when we were setting up the company, or I can't. It may have even been afterwards, but it was in that same period of like, okay, so what are we doing next? What are we going to do these next few years? it was a very conscious decision that, like, well, how about moving away from this one sort of mode where we work pretty hard or very hard. We have, and we're fortunate enough to get like a good salary, and we work and work and work, and then we've like cram like all our payback, if you like, into those like 3 weeks of vacation or whatever it is. And it very much felt that that wasn't a particularly balanced or necessarily um, sustainable way of continuing to live our lives and bring up our kids and that kind of thing. And the idea of starting our company, and we had no illusions, we knew we'd have to work a lot, but working in an environment um, where we're kind of where we enjoyed our vacation and playtime becomes our daily. So instead of our customers and the events we do, are outdoors in the mountains, not always in the mountains, more often than not, like in some city center actually, but still, outdoors. Maybe you're not fighting with the rain, but you're providing sustenance to people who are fighting through the rain. But that was a very conscious decision of like, let's make our work time in that sort of ecosystem, if you like, and as opposed to that one where we're like working in one ecosystem to go and enjoy it in another one. We wanted to really move everything to the one, and that's something that I don't think we've ever regretted at all. That's something that's played out really well because like-minded spirits kind of gravitate there.
But also, like that kind of shift too can be stressful for a lot of people. That change is difficult,
Mm.
and it's good that you have the support of your wife who's on the same page to kind of go down that path together. Now, why did you guys enter into an industry that was already pretty competitive, I'd say?
Um, I think, well, it wasn't like we got to pick, sort of thing. It wasn't like it did happen very organically. That's maybe not a great word, but it did happen. It did feel like a natural gravitation. Like it was, we had this idea and that can work. Let's give it a shot. There was actually a previous business activity which we had a shot at before Xact Nutrition. With there were a lot of similarities, but it wasn't like, this wasn't our first go. Our first go was maybe predated it by 2 years, and it was in the natural health products. It was actually looking at, can we harness the benefits, the health benefits of wine without the alcohol, and make these drinkable, trying to make a supplement like enjoyable. So instead of like a white pill, which is sort of very medical, we're working with like extracts from like grapes and the byproducts from the winemaking industry, and trying to bring not necessarily a tasty, but like a more sort of, I'd say, healthy experience of consuming a natural health product than just like popping some tablets. It didn't work out though, and like not at all. It wasn't like we had to. Oh, do we keep on going? It's like, no, this is done. This isn't working. And it was from there that we had the idea of actually being a bit more integrated into how the business and the products work. And the one thing I was determined to do was I want the sporting public to decide, not some executive, in Toronto that I've never met. And that's kind of what carried us through, and had that initial start.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and you're right. Like the best way to determine if a product's going to be successful a lot is the public. They're the ones that are going to drive it. Does this taste good? Do I digest this well? Do I like the variety of flavors? Do they offer enough products to me? But certainly, like that takes time, right, to build a sample size.
Yeah,
And
well, we're
like,
11. It's 11 years in, so
Yeah,
it takes
right.
a long time.
Well, now, but so what was your background going into it? Like
So
you,
I'm actually I did a chemistry degree. My wife did chemical, and well, she did a very similar degree. It's basically chemistry, but with a bit more engineering. So I actually went into and into business. I worked for a pharmaceutical company, so life sciences, and I was working either sales or sales training or marketing on that side of things. With a lot of medical, with a lot of education, a lot of adult education, whether it be for colleagues as a trainer on disease processes and treatments and things like that, or setting up educational projects for partners, whether they be healthcare professionals or other. My wife worked actually in the production and quality control in food companies, like big food companies like Nestle and Kraft and Canada Bread and companies like that. So her expertise was, actually getting vast amounts of not very nice food made, and my job was more in like the communication, training, talking to people side of things.
Okay.
And that's what we both started in. We had those jobs in England, we had those jobs in France, and also we had those jobs in Canada until we finally started Xact.
So did you continue your jobs while you were doing Xact at the same
I
time?
did, yeah, I did, yeah. So it was the first few years it was really it was a side hustle. It was weekends and nights. Marianne was actually more full time on it, as she had left her job. But I juggled the two for quite some time, and it's true. You did mention it can be stressful making those shifts and changes. It definitely was. It definitely was stressful. But in those early days as well, it was extremely stimulating. Like it was very, very like rewarding and fun. But it's true, when you're having to take vacation off one job to go and do the other job, it's not sustainable long term. But I made it work.
Yeah. And do you find that, was it easy? Like, you guys are business partners, right? Like,
Yeah.
is it, some people can't even manage their own marriage correctly, let alone having a business together. You guys are clearly working together very well. And after 11 years, you're still together and happy. But like, does it put stress on the relationship at times? Is it difficult?
It definitely does. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. I must admit, I'd say pleasant. I've got to do something about the dog again.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I'll just walk away and come back.
No worries.
So it definitely does put there's no doubt that any relationship has its stresses. Any job has its stresses. When you put the two together, there's definitely more stresses and more stresses of stress. I think on the whole, I must admit, I kind of feel a bit odd talking about it with Marianne not talking about it either, but she's not here, so I'll just talk about it. I think what kind of makes it possible, and even makes it, I think it's pretty successful, is the cool thing. Actually, it's not like we're struggling and it's like, no, it's actually most of the time super fun and super rewarding and super stimulating. Maybe not so super fun and rewarding for like the people like immediately around us. Like I think about our Alex and Kim, our kids, like they, that's kind of the only topic all the time, pretty much. So maybe that gets a bit worrisome, but we're extremely complementary. So Marianne's skill set is like I am so shit at those things. It is untrue. And my skill set is those aren't things that interest her like at all. So I think that's probably like one of the saving graces, or what makes it not just possible but also effective and efficient as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like we're kind of, I think if you're in a situation where if you had very like similar skill sets, you're kind of checking each other, right? But
yeah,
I know that there's a whole load of things that it's just done and done awesomely, and so that makes it a lot less stressful, right? I'm not worrying about that. I can worry on my thing,
right.
and vice versa.
Well, maybe we could say that's the recipe for success.
From my perspective, I'd say so.
Yeah. You want to just maybe go through the evolution of where Xact started and where it's,
Sure. Yeah.
how
we
it's gotten to where it is?
very much. We started super local. no online presence, maybe a Facebook page. We weren't called Xact at the time. We were just, our first product at the time, it was called Fruit Square or Fruit 2. So we were called Fruit 2.
Oh, I remember
Yeah.
Fruit too.
My uncle, who's he's not a graphic designer actually. He's an artist, an illustrator. He did the first packaging and the first branding stuff, and it really was. It is. I mean, I look at it now and I smile. If I was doing it over, like I'd definitely do it differently. But at the time, it was fun and fresh and exciting, and we had a fantastic product inside that package, which actually hasn't changed. Those original 3 flavors that we launched, we have not changed the recipe one bit. All how the product development has taken on has been adding to those things. I'm pretty stoked that 11 years on, in fact, our best-selling SKU, our best-selling product is a strawberry energy fruit bar, and that same recipe is what was being handed out at our first ever feed station, which was 2012 Mount Orford at the X Trail trail race, very windy October morning. So we started with these pâtes de fruits in French, or we call it an energy fruit bar. It's not a great translation, but it's what we've got. So we started with these products, and I think we've always been a kind of a product focused company. It's not like me and Marianne, we didn't have marketing jobs or brand jobs or agency jobs, and we're like, well, let's look at this market. It's like, let's make these things which we think taste good and run with it. So the making the thing that was definitely in our wheelhouse. We had the expertise to work with our manufacturing partners to make a product and really understand and optimize all the other things that are so important, like food regulations. Like there's a lot of regulation in the food industry,
Yeah.
right? It's important. We're putting these things in our bodies. So expiration dates, the logistics, the shipping, actually having product available, being able to sell the thing, and stored properly. It's a huge skill and expertise in itself, and so we're kind of maybe a little bit, I'd say, a little bit amateurish. Like we definitely learned as we went along, and it was super simple. I phoned up a distributor company. I'm just like, yeah, we've and well, they didn't actually answer the call. I don't think. Like we're just like, oh shit, like no one wants to sell this brand they've never heard of, like ever. I guess I better do it. And so that's what we did. So I'd go to run stores and ski stores and bike stores and turn up with like a few bars, and people would try it out, and they'd have no idea who I was or what this thing was, or like would their customers want it or not.
Mhm.
But gradually, little by little bit, some stores would take it on. I gotta have a shout out to our first ever paying customer, Le Coureur Nordique in Quebec City. Jimmy Gobet and his business partner Joliane at the time. They're like, yeah, we're getting this. This is awesome. I was like, oh, I think I was more surprised than they were.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know at the time is like this is one of the most successful run stores in the world for their footprint size. Like,
Wow.
and maybe not back in 2012 they weren't, but that's who they grew to be. And they have an amazing, and I think actually now I didn't realize at the time, but I realized having them as a customer and seeing what they did with the run community in Quebec City, I actually learned a lot really quickly, like in a few weeks. I mean, like in a few months. Their group runs that they had on a Thursday night on the Plaine des Baranes. Oh, there's like 120 people turn up to that doing intervals together on a dark Thursday night, and they were our first ever customer, and we had 2 customers before that extra race. It was them and Le Coureur in Sherbrooke. So no one even in Montreal. But Montreal came on rapidly, and what
Mhm.
we did is, so very quickly we also found that we'd go to these stores and like, well, no one's coming in and asking for it, so no thanks. So that's when we started going to these races like Extra Orford, who at the time was owned and ran by a friend of mine, by Nick Taillefer. And it's actually an interesting side note when we're working on like, okay, that's I think we've got an idea to have an alternative to an energy gel or an energy chew, and I had these pâtes de fruits. And at the time, I was somehow, I never really understood why, but I was invited to run with this group of friends who, for one of theirs birthday, they'd celebrate it by running that number of kilometers that he was old. And so at the time, I think he was like 35 or something. And but they never really sort of broke that down to me. They didn't sort of spell out exactly what happened. And I think they may have called it like a jog or a hike, and it was in French too. And I was kind of like, oh yeah, we're going for a hike. And I'm like, oh, I love hiking. Yeah, would you like to come? Like, you're fucking right, I would. It'd be awesome. Like, in the hills and eastern townships. And I remember this one point, I was like, okay, I better get ready. So like, I went and bought some hiking boots, like the big, leather hiking boots that like weigh a couple of kilos. So I phoned up my mate Lee J. I was like, yeah, so I'm ready. Bought my boots. Like, see you next weekend. So I think, and he says like, boots? Yeah. We're running, man. You need running shoes. I'm like, but it's 35K. Like, the two things didn't go together in my like worldview back then.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, oh no, well this isn't for me. It's like, no, come anyway. You'll be great. I was like, I don't think so. It's like, no. Just go and buy some trail running shoes and come. You'll be fine. I bought the trail running shoes.
Yeah.
I went. I wouldn't say like his idea of fine and my idea of fine wasn't exactly the same, but I had a wonderful half of the run with them. I bailed. There was like, they had organized. We were running around J Peak, and I brought along these fruit bars to kind of test them, because this was a bunch of pretty experienced has-been athletes. And one of the people in that car was Martin St. Pierre. So back in I guess it was early 2012, it may have even been 2011. I remember like after the run getting out these like pâtes de fruits. This is before we made them. These were just samples, and just kind of handing them out to the guys. And these are people who had been like using gels and training, been on national teams or provincial teams in either running or skiing or cycling or triathlon. And they weren't, ils étaient pas maman. Like these were different people from me. That's what I felt. But they kind of handed them out, and they're like, yeah, well, these are great. Yeah, I'd eat that all the time. And that's where like that first sort of validation of the idea of the product came. And from then, we took the gamble to, okay, we'll get packaging made. We'll pay for that packaging. We'll get it sent. And in those early days, we also had a lot of like fantastic help. Like we couldn't send a pallet of product to my house here on Clark Street. Like there's no like there's a bike path. There's like very very enthusiastic parking meter agents. Like, so we even to get the product just shipped somewhere. Like, we basically called in favors, and we had amazing help from different folks in the sporting community, who were actually able to warehouse those first deliveries before we managed to get our own space and so on. So it grew from there, very much like just promoting in a 3-hour driving radius of our house, because it was weekends and evenings, right? We, flying to Toronto to promote we didn't even think about it until we're able to make that jump where, okay, stores are buying it, stores are reordering it. People are ordering it online from other online marketers of our product. Athletic.ca was our first like online partner. They're still a partner today. And it was, and the other really important piece of it is Marianne's father, who's actually a postdoc chemist, worked in formulation and nutrition and product development, food product development his whole career. And also he had a network. He knew small family-run companies in France and Spain and Germany that were basically, it didn't strike them as completely crazy to just like make a few pallets, just make a few thousand bars to get us started, because most companies, you got to hit those minimums. It's the same as getting bike kits made, right? But instead of the minimum being 20 pieces, it's it's 2 million pieces. And it was through Alain, Marianne's dad's expertise, Marianne's expertise, and I was very comfortable on the promotional side. We had these 3 different pieces, so we were able to get it made, but made super professionally to a spec. Like, we knew exactly what was going on that side of thing. And the sort of the selling promotion bit, I kind of figured out as I went along. But it's not like I didn't have a background in sales and marketing. I did, but the sports industry and retail and online, I had no experience of that. So that's something that we figured out as we went along.
And did the response from the community, from the athletes, give you this confidence to
100%. So
Yeah.
that's always been the way. It's like whenever we turn up, and it's the same exactly today as it was in some godforsaken snowshoe race in Sherbrooke with like 8 people turning out. You turn up with the bar and you're just like, hey, try this. Okay. Oh, c'est donc ben bien. C'est
Yeah.
donc ben bon. And which translation, this tastes awesome.
Yeah.
We it's always been the athlete community, whether it be runners or triathletes or skiers or cyclists or judokas, that has given us that confidence and that validation of like, yes, this product works for me. Yes, I want to eat this. I want this to be my fuel. This this sits better with me. I like the fact you're this small company actually turning up to the event and supporting the event. This aligns with with what I want to support. This is where I want to spend my money and support a business. Um, that was always been really. It's always felt right and natural and easy and fun when we're in the community itself. The figuring out the distribution, the retail side of it, the e-com side of it, that's always been like the harder bit. But that also, what I'm really happy to say is, particularly lately and very lately, as the company grew, as our product range grew, as our customer base grew, and also getting through the pandemic, which was rather a challenge on in itself. We got to a point where we were able to create jobs, which is actually the single thing I'm probably most proud of. Even more proud of like having a great product, creating like real jobs with real salaries and health benefits and paid time off. Not many, but 3 of them now, and we were able to get the talent, able to bring in that help and that expertise, like real professionals who understand retail, who understand proper bookkeeping, who understand all these things. And that's, I think there've been like 3 levels in our company's growth. There was level
Mhm.
1, which was kind of me and Marianne figuring it out and running around. Then when Alistair joined us as a business partner, that was like the second level. And when we moved, I left my other full-time job for this full-time job, and it was basically pure hustle, a lot of energy put in, but also a lot of gratification, and 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 basically understanding that was a real learning phase. And now I think we're in a phase is like we've actually figured some stuff out, and we kind of know what works, and we're beginning to get our recipe of how to continue to develop the business and how to work with a wider variety of customers, whether they be business customers like Mech or whether it be forerunners in Vancouver or boutique career here in Montreal,
Mhm.
and the wider community too.
So you feel like you finally found your stride?
Oh yeah, I think I did. Yeah, like maybe on Sunday. Yeah,
That's
it's a
so good.
handoff point number 5. I think I found my stride.
What do you
Then the
think is
quad pain
the
kicked in.
what do you think is the biggest lesson that you've learned through that whole process?
Oh gosh, I think that's hard to nail down. To be honest, I think that's super hard to nail down. Um, and so because it's hard to nail down, you do sort of find yourself making like generalizations. And so it's very true, but not very sort of exciting sounding, to like keeping an open mind, a mixture of like having confidence in your plan and sticking to it. I mean, I was a bit disappointing really. I don't think there's a real particular gem in itself. um I think I think turning turning up and being ready to engage with whoever it is you're going to turn up and engage with, whether it be a supplier, even a government agency. Don't turn up quite with the same energy, perhaps, but you still got to turn up and engage. Or with at run around at Sieni headquarters on last Sunday morning, turning up like ready to do business, do your run, do your meeting with you know the best that you can muster on the day. Um, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah. I think it's a difficult feat too. I mean, athletes are creatures of habit, and that's not an
Sure.
easy one to crack, you know. It takes time, it takes effort, but I love the fact that you guys are like a family business, that you're from the same place I'm from, that we can connect and that you're engaged with the community, because I think that's like, this podcast I hope grows organically because of the connections I make and the conversations I have, and that listeners connect. But you can do the same on your feet, showing up to events and supporting um, athletes everywhere. And I think that's really commendable, So
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah. And like, do you find like that there's been some real success stories that you've like of people you've met that you've
Oh
crossed
my
paths
God,
with?
yeah. Oh, so that was a huge part. I think especially maybe in those like and still that's been one part that's been true all the way through. So we were blown away by generosity of folks that we just meet to either help or support us in some way or another. And I know there's some really super inspiring people. And so just I got to shout two names out: Jeff Gosselin and Florent Bouguin. I remember, and so there's definitely a couple of phases. Phase one was like, oh my god, I can't believe they did that. Insert big number race. But then you get to know them and meet them as a person, and you realize that, oh, like, yeah, it's maybe not so surprising they did that insert big number race. Like, what a, what a, what an incredible person! What an incredible way they like live their life and the relationships they nurture and so on. And the list is kind of, I mean, it's pretty much endless. I'd say the number of people who we've had the chance to interact with and meet, and they've been a source of inspiration for us. And they're members of the community, the communities that we serve. And it started off with, I think, probably, yeah, I'll say Jeff and Florent in Quebec City, but it pops up all the time everywhere. And it could be Jeremy at Ciele, it could be Vincent, who I just met in Hamilton just a couple of months ago. It's amazing what he's doing in underprivileged areas of Hamilton, and what his goals are. Like crazy ambitious, awesome, important goals of helping youth stay in education using sport. So that's actually pretty cool. It's kind of that's been a constant thing. And when things are going a bit tough, it's really nice to be so immediately surrounded by so many folks, um, men and women, Canada and the US, who really like help you daily.
If there was like a message that you would like to share, like through your work, through like maybe a message to the community itself, what would it be?
I think so. I think um, it's actually a question that you asked earlier, and I couldn't really answer it, but I think just chatting afterwards, I found it. And maybe that's the message. It's just I think it's really important to be able to feel good about what you're doing. And so in this context of running a business, it's also my job. It's my business, but it's my job as well. I think that's a really helpful good thing. So if you can feel good about like how you earn your living, and how you work and interact with people, um, that's that I reckon that's maybe like 90% of the game of life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And how do you find that movement helps you in your everyday life?
What movement? Sorry.
Like
Oh,
any
physical
type
movement.
of movement. Yeah.
Oh, ah. So um, I'd say it's a so as the obligations and size and commitments and pressure have increased, like the most blatantly obvious way is as a source of like relief, like the one time in the day where you can just like, okay, I'll go for this run with my dog or whatever. And during that time, and I used to always run with music. I never run with music now. unless it's a relay and it's a speaker, but not with headphones. And just I always find that whatever was bugging me, annoying me, stressing me before the run is always not necessarily solved, but at least calmed down a bit. So that's just magical right there. So just like the daily business of being able to have it as a release, huge. And but then the list goes on. So it's how our business works. Without sporting communities, I don't think we'd feel so good about. I think it'd be way less interesting. It'd definitely be way less fun. I think it'd be harder. So the movements or people moving or however you want to call it, that's around us, not what we're doing, but what we're a part of, I think is huge. And what makes the project, the mission, the mission of our company, actually sort of worthwhile and fun, as well as paying the bills. You got to pay the bills too, man.
Of course, yeah. It's a big one for sure. So I know you got a packed schedule and everything, but what's coming up next for you?
So next for us, so next for us is BMO Vancouver Marathon. Big event for us. It's our second biggest event. Then we've got some smaller community races. The Fireman's Race in Laval, Dunham 50, a really cool gravel 25 and 50K organized by my friend and Hoka rep Alexis Lucier in Eastern Townships. And then it's the big show, which is Ottawa Race Weekend at the end of May. That's our biggest event, fueling and helping 30,000 people recover on the race course and at Confederation Confederation Park. That's one of the highlights of our year. But our event calendar is jam packed until the run event in Austin in first week of December. So it starts, the season kind of starts with around the Bay end of March, and we're more or less, I wouldn't say non-stop, but we're very occupied right from March until end of November, first week in December. Special shout out for two events. Quebec Mega Trail in Mont Saint-Anne, first weekend of July. That'll be a really fun event for us. We've invited our ambassadors to run and race and crew and cheer at that event. We'll also be as well as supplying our own food, our own products for everyone who's racing. We'll also be we're going to be trying out and playing with custom food for our athletes who are running too. So not just the packaged industrial stuff, but Larry's Kitchen is moving to Santan that weekend.
Nice.
And then another sort of team build, that what I loved about Runaround was it was we weren't there necessarily. Well, yeah, we promoted. I can't help promoting. It's in my blood. But first and foremost, it was a team building event. And we have another team building event in October, which is Run to Montreal. So we'll be having Xact will be fielding a team. Alistair will be crewing again. So it's funny that definitely our best runner is now crewing and photographing as well as actually racing. In October, we'll be putting together Team Xact. Recruitment is underway. I managed to sabotage a few people's Octobers at the CLA party. So thank you, Raoul. Thank you, Heidi. A couple of awesome team members jumping on. That'll be a really cool race. So that starts Toronto downtown and finishes at the Lookout on Mount Ryle in October.
So if you're listening, hit up Lawrence for a spot on his team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like Alistair's maybe taking early retirement or something. He's
Oh no, I think that's just when I'm there. He's racing Vancouver Marathon. It's just that when I was running in 120, I think he's actually pretty smart. He's just
too much competition.
He might be doing let's say 5:15 a minute, and Alistair wants to be doing 3:30, and he just knows a dead duck when he sees one. So yeah.
Good stuff. Well, Lawrence, what can I say? Thank you so much for coming on. It definitely didn't show that this was your first podcast interview. You did exceptionally well.
Oh, thanks, man. That was
I love your spirit, your energy, and everything you bring to the run community. You're turning up everywhere and supporting people. And in turn, I think you're seeing the same thing coming right back at you. And I don't think there's a better way to grow a brand or a community than that. So thank you very much for all the work
Well,
you do.
thank you. That's very kind words. Thanks, Justin.
No problem. And we'll see you around. Hopefully I make it to the Ottawa 10K. I'm really trying.
That would be a good one. That's a beautiful race.
Take care.
Take care, mate.